Assembling the right organizational change team for your digital transformation is one of the most important things you can do. What I want to talk about today is how to define and structure that organizational change management team so that you can ultimately ensure success. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients through their digital transformation journeys. And establishing the right change management team with the right roles and responsibilities is sort of the glue that ties together people, process, and technology within a digital transformation. And just to visualize what I mean by that is oftentimes you have organizations that are starting here. This is we'll call this the as is. And you've got your employees here, and these are supposed to be employees here times however many employees you have, however many thousands or hundreds you have. You have all these people that are here, and you're trying to get them over here to the 2B. So, this is where computers and automation come in. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, I'm a terrible artist, so I'm not going to do a lot of that. That's supposed to be a computer, but call that a computer, call it a robot, call it artificial intelligence, process changes, organizational changes, whatever your future state entails, that's your 2B. So the question is, how do we get your hundreds or thousands of employees from the as is over to the 2B? And the way we do that is through change management. Change management is ultimately the thing that's going to connect the dots and get you from point A to point B. Now, a lot of organizations assume that if we just put in the new technology, we build it and they will come. The people will follow. We'll train people how to use the technology. We'll train them on the new processes, and people are just going to naturally gravitate over to that new process. That never happens. So we need a change management team that can guide people through the entire journey, which takes time and arguably takes more time in most cases to affect change from a people perspective than it does from a technology perspective or even a process perspective. So the question then is, how do we build the right change management team, and what are those roles on a change management team that we need to focus on? Well, first of all, you have your executive sponsor. And this, you could argue, is the most important person in the whole change management team. So this person, he or she, needs to know what the change is and how they're going to affect the change, and they need to set the vision for the change. So the executive sponsor is the one that's going to be the face of change. They're oftentimes going to define the direction and the overall strategy. They may even be heavily involved in defining what this 2B is, or they should be heavily involved in defining what that 2B future state is, at least from an operational decision-making perspective. But the executive sponsor can't do it alone. You also need change agents. And what I mean by that these are the people that are typically internal within the organization. These are people that are going to become down in the weeds or down on the front lines, helping people enable the change and helping the organization enable the change. So these change agents are the ones that are going to be interacting with these hundreds or thousands of employees within the organization, and they're going to be affecting the change so that they can ultimately help push or move the people from the current state to the future state. So change agents oftentimes are considered process leads, or they may have a dual role as a process lead. They're generally highly respected within the organization. They generally understand the organization well, so they've generally been around for a while to build credibility, but they're not so set in the ways of the organization that they can't see the vision for how things could be. And from a pure personality perspective, these change agents should also be people that are very excitable. They should be excited about the change, people that can communicate well, they're influencers within the organization, and they're optimistic, so they generally can sell the message or sell the vision to the organization. These people are critical to connecting the dots between the vision of the executive sponsor and actually translating that into results that are going to get us from the as is to the 2B. Now, generally, the change agents aren't being managed or working under the direction of the executive sponsor, but they are heavily influenced by the vision and the direction of the executive sponsor. Now, day to day, as it relates to the transformation itself and the more tactical aspects of the transformation, they're generally working within the context of a broader change strategy and a broader change team. So generally, you're going to have a change lead. So most organizations are going to have a internal change management lead, as well as oftentimes an outside third party that's an expert in change management. For example, companies like Third Stage, we specialize in change management and can help fill that role and help coach whoever your internal change lead is. But regardless of who you use as an outside third party, you want to make sure that this change lead is ultimately owned by someone within your organization. Sometimes this might be your HR department. It could be someone from your learning and development department. It could even be someone within operations. We've seen organizations that might have a senior operational person or a senior person within finance that understands the business really well and ends up being the change lead because they have some of the raw skills required to be an effective change lead, or perhaps they've done a lot of complex organizational change in the past. But whatever the case may be, you want to have a change lead that the change agents work within the context of this overall change plan. In addition to change agents, you also generally are going to have a communications lead or a communications team. So these are the people that would draft communications, that would go out to different stakeholders and targeted communications using different communication vehicles, whether it's emails or videos or bulletin board postings or in-person meetings, one-on-one discussions, whatever the case may be. The communications team is often drafting and crafting the messaging behind what the changes are. Now keep in mind, these people are not working in isolation. They're not off on their own creating this messaging. It should typically come back to the executive sponsors. So the executive sponsor needs to be heavily influencing what types of communications are going out, as should the change lead. But ultimately, we want to tie it back to this future state vision of where we're headed as an organization. And by the way, we don't want to focus too much on this. We want to I don't want to say we want to ignore it, but we don't want to focus too much on the technology. We want to focus on what is the business transformation, why are we going through this, and how is digital technology going to enable that business transformation. So technology is an enabler of it, but it's more the future state business transformation that we're typically focused on as it relates to the communications and the overall change management. Now, typically you also have another role here, which is training. So in addition to communications, you have a training lead, which typically could be one person. It might even be a whole team of people that are helping facilitate training. And this is actually a very extensive process. This often gets underestimated, how much time and effort goes into facilitating training, largely because oftentimes what you're getting from software vendors or technology providers is a very generic training material that doesn't apply to your business or your industry. So part of the training team's role is to customize or tailor those materials for your organization. And then ultimately, once you have those materials in place, you need people that can actually go out and execute the implementation of the training. Now, what we typically say is you shouldn't necessarily just have a training centralized team that's doing all the training, but these are more facilitators of the training where either the change agents or other stakeholders within the organization, key stakeholders that might be involved in helping enable some of the changes, they might be enabling some of the change and enabling some of the training as well. So training might be facilitated by this group here, but it's typically the change agents, stakeholders, other process leads, other people on the project that may be actually rolling that change or rolling that training out to the organization. So some other roles that these different people can play on a project or value they can add to the change process, one important one is the change impact. So when we define what this future state is, there's a big gap between the as is and the to be. Our processes are changing, our roles and responsibilities are changing, technology is changing, a lot of stuff is changing, and we need someone to define what this gap here is. Typically, your technology provider, your system integrator is not going to do that. They're more focused on, let's build the technology, but we as an organizational change team need to figure out this gap here. And typically, it's in a combination of the change agents, stakeholders. It might even be core parts of your change management team in addition to or beyond the change agents or stakeholders that would help identify what those change impacts are. But that's a really important baseline or foundation or prerequisite for enabling the change, is defining how each individual and each work group within the organization is affected differently by the transition from the current state to the future state. And it's not just one definition, to be clear. It's not just one way that the organization is affected. It's however many hundreds or thousands of employees you have, that's how many people are affected in different ways by the organization. So we've got to do a very targeted definition of those change impacts so that we can communicate that better to the organization. Now, the last thing I'll note is, how does this tie into the overall transformation team, the overall project management team? And generally, you have the PMO that's operating the overall transformation. You've got process leads, you've got architects, you've got integration folks, you've got system integrator resources, whatever the case may be. And actually, if you want to unpack this whole project team a bit more, I have a whole video on my YouTube channel that covers how to structure your overall transformation team. So just go to my YouTube channel and search transformation team and you'll find this video. So we talk about that in more detail, but as it relates to change management, this all needs to be integrated with and ideally part of the overall PMO. We don't want this operating in isolation. Even though we've focused on change management here in today's discussion, this ultimately needs to be part of the overall PMO. And the more you can bake these change activities into the inner workings of the project, and the more we can weave those activities into the overall program, the less likely it is that change management becomes an afterthought or gets cut because we don't have time to do it. So we end up making it more embedded or ingrained within our overall transformation. So I hope this gives you a starting point to think about those different roles and responsibilities and how we might start to structure our team. There's a lot more you can use to flush out this project team and other roles and responsibilities that might be required. I also encourage you to check out some of the videos on my YouTube channel that define specific change strategies and change tactics in more detail. So this just covers the team itself, but what does this team do once they're defined? That's something we've defined in other videos on my channel. And I also encourage you to download our Guide to Organizational Change Management. That guide uncovers or unpacks a lot of different things that are important to managing a change initiative like a digital transformation or business transformation. So I've included a link below. I encourage you to check that out. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day.